Hello, everyone. This is Brian. We're going to wait a couple minutes for some more people to join. We'll start a couple minutes after. All right, guys, so we're a couple minutes after, so we'll go ahead and get started. So this is our last webinar currently in our series we've gone through, Adam and I. So hopefully a lot of you have been able to join these and get some value out of them, but you can see up on the screen right now, these are the ones that we've currently gone through. So receipts routing, how you can automate some of the transfers and inbound shipments, modern shop floor, creating that simple user interface where you can do things like clock in, clock out, work order completions. And then Adam and I did a CRM planning, so kind of a joint effort of taking a quote, driving it through planning, and running it through the transactions needed inside of JDE. This past Tuesday, Adam did a make advanced pricing work, which was kind of talking through some of the options you could utilize advanced pricing for that you may not have thought of in the past. And then today we're going to be talking about some production scheduling, how you can utilize the capacity planning module in some of the applications, ADF applications in JD Edwards to help you better run products through your organization and your shop floor. So quick intros for those of you who haven't been on the calls. So Brian Rose, I'm a manager at Trillium. I also oversee our manufacturing team. I've been with Trillium for almost 8 years now. Been fortunate to do tons and tons of integrations of JD Edwards and also utilizing a lot of the new UX1 IoT type tools, Orchestrator, to be one of the heavy hitters, and then obviously all the personal form extensions, stuff like that. And Adam is on the call. He's going to be helping me out from a questions perspective. If you guys do have any questions throughout this, please feel free to ask those. Also, this is a link to all of those recordings that we've gone through up to this point. So I'll sit on the screen for a second, allow you guys to, if you want to, write down this URL. If you get there, you'll get all the 4 we've done so far. And then once we have this 5th one completed, we'll make sure to add that as well. So good little recording. It'll allow you to get to the series and work through all of those if you weren't able to join them when we did them live. How you ask questions. So like I said earlier, Adam will be monitoring that along the way. Feel free to ask them throughout. This is hopefully going to be collaborative for you guys. So as you ask questions, Adam will make sure to interrupt me so I can stay on that topic and answer them as we go. Okay, so like I said, this is our production scheduling session. So we're going to talk about some of the key requirements you need for capacity planning / production scheduling. The Workcenter load calendar, this is something that has been around for a couple of years, but not many people know about it and some of the functionality around it. So we'll be talking about that. I'm not going to bore you in PowerPoint, so we'll do some demonstrations pretty quickly as we get into this. And we'll go through, obviously, Q&A along the way as Adam gets in front of me. So some of the key data elements for planning, just like everything in JD Edwards or any ERP system you utilize, you need to have the foundation solid. So without this, none of the functionality around planning or capacity or MRP or procurement or anything in JD Edwards is going to be what you want it to be. So item data is obviously crucial, making sure that you have all your configuration, your CAT codes, what master planning family is this item associated to. All of those are in line. Bill of materials is more something that you need to have solidified for resource type planning, not really capacity. But if you want to make sure you have the right products coming in and you're building the right materials up to spec, those bill of materials are going to be absolutely crucial. Routings is really where the production scheduling piece, it relies on that information. So having good routings with correct work centers, which has, your run labor, your setup time, and your queue or move, all of that is really driving your scheduling tactics inside of JD Edwards. Without that, none of what I'm going to be going through today is going to help you because the information is going to be incorrect. Work centers, like I talked about, that is another driver where you're defining, is this work center labor-based? Is it machine-based? Does it have setup labor? Stuff like that. Is it a capacity type work center, or is it something we're not really worried about capacity because it's not a bottleneck for us? We know we can always run through as many jobs as we can. And then for some planning, right, branch plan relationships, supplier schedules, and some safety stock stuff. So these are the different levels of capacity planning inside of JDE. And they kind of tie to the different strategic plans or the different plans, I'll call it. So you have your forecasting, which you run, resource requirements planning, master scheduling, you would run a rough cut. And then for materials planning, you'd run capacity, CRP. 95% of the organizations that I go into really start at the lowest level, and that's what they use. They do MRP with capacity planning. Some, if they want to, can get into some more of the MPS type scheduling and the SNOP type scheduling at the strategic level, but I don't see that all that often in a lot of the organizations that we go into. So there are some key pieces to set up when we talk about our work centers. And this is some of the things that we're going to be talking about. I'll jump into JD and get through all these different tactics, but work center definition is obviously key. So associating dispatch groups. So a dispatch group is a way to link multiple work centers together. This adds value because you can roll up those work centers to look at total capacities across the board. And you can look at like work centers. So if you wanted to do things like swinging a line when you're out of capacity, having those dispatch groups set up is obviously key. Prime loads, this is where in that work center setup, you are saying what type of labor or what type of hours is driving this work center. Is it labor? Is it machine? Is it labor plus setup? So depending on if this work center is very heavy machine based or it's an assembly line where you're having people do a lot of the work, that's what's going to drive your capacities. The critical work center, this is where you do define, is this a work center that is applicable to capacity planning? Do I want to include it in type of that capacity planning, or do I want to skip it and utilize capacity planning for other work centers? There are some different offsets you can do, and then efficiencies and utilization. So efficiency is if you have a specific work center that is 95% efficient, it would utilize that percentage to calculate a rated capacity. So your gross capacity is going to be whatever the employee type times the hours per resource times the work center calendar, and then it will give you a rated capacity based on that efficiency and utilization as well. So if you only utilize it 50% of the time, it's going to give you half of your rated capacity from a load perspective. So some of the key things too is how do you categorize your throughput? So when you go through, and this is key, once again, talking about item structures and routing structures, you're going to want to, for the most part, most of the organizations that we go to, they want to run like products together. And the big reasonings for that is the ability to keep machines and changeover and setup time down. If you have products that run on similar setups, you're going to want to keep those to where you don't have to shift 4 hours of setup time between this product and that product. So we utilize things like planning codes and different groupings from a category code perspective to create those product structures. And that gives us the efficiencies to run those through your specific organization's shop floor. Now this is that work center setup, and I have a couple of different screens in here, and I'm going to skip over them because I'm going to show you it inside of JDE. But work center setup is obviously key. Our work center resources unit, so this is taking that how much time from a capacity perspective that you have at that resource level. And then there's a couple of different ways that you can look at this data. So you have the work center load review. This app has been around forever. It allows you to look at, like I talked about, you can look at rated profile, loaded profile, how many resources have been used. What I do like about this is you can look at plan orders too. So if you have MRP running, this looks at both firm and released / planned orders. So this can be configured however you want. You can come in here and do it weekly, daily, monthly, and it'll give you a loaded profile, and the loaded profile is hours based on what you have running through that specific work center. And then there's another view, which I try and have organizations leverage if they can, and it's this work center load capacity calendar. So it's a much more visual view from a JD Edwards perspective. You can see what work orders are running through. You can see what your capacities look like, and there's all different views that you can do inside of JDE. Okay, so I'll jump into and do a demo on that and show you what all that looks like. Some people always ask some technical details around this application. There are some things you're going to want to make sure you have configured from an architect perspective. The first thing is you'll notice the application is E313000. So it's not a standard interactive app that would start with a P. Anytime you see those E's, it's an ADF app, which is just another framework that Oracle has used to build out these more intuitive front-end screens. You do need to be on 9.1 apps, 9.153 tools for the Work Center Load calendar. And then once again, some of the more technical pieces that you'll see here, having that ADF server set up with web logic, and then having the components installed in your current environment. So just going through those to make sure that everyone's aware of it. You can refer back to this PowerPoint if you do that, go down the path and want to make sure you have all those requirements set up. You'll have access to this PowerPoint. So, all right, like I said, I'm gonna keep the PowerPoint short, and we're gonna jump over to JDE and start working through what some of this stuff looks like. So let's go ahead and get signed in. Okay, so when I sign in, this is just an example of a composed page. I'm sure all of you guys have seen these before. These can be configured however you want, based on your specific role within an organization. It'll give you all your jet pages and your task views and your watch list and all of that. So a good way to get into the system from an organizational perspective. The apps we're going to be utilizing today or going through today, I have up here in my favorites. So these are going to be some of the keys, and I'm going to talk through kind of from the bottom up, building this to what is important from a setup perspective. We're not going to get into the detail of how do you create a routing, but what are some of the key work center components you're going to want to make sure are configured, making sure you run your resource profile, things like that. Okay, so where we're going to start is our work centers. So work centers can be defined across all different branches, and each branch, just like an item branch record, you can have the same work center configured differently across each branch. So maybe the rates are different, maybe the amount of people you have working there is different. All of that is dependent on your specific organization. So if I click in here, only going through some of the key pieces that are going to be drivers for your capacity planning and your production scheduling. Dispatch group, like we talked about, great way to group like work centers together. In here, prime load. This is another huge piece when it comes to looking at your production scheduling / capacity planning. So if I click this drop down, you'll see some of the options that you have. So you can do run labor, machine plus setup, run labor hours, machine labors only. And those are the key ones that we see most people use. I would say the majority of the time it's run labor, but depending on how you have your routings configured, that can obviously be utilized in different ways. And then critical work center, this, like I talked about, is the different levels you want to run this capacity planning at. So is it a critical work center for rough cut? Is it a critical work center for requirements planning? If you're just utilizing standard CRP, which is this lowest level tied to an MRP, 3 is what you're going to want to be using. Okay, that's what we see mostly across the board. If it isn't a capacity work center, you can put this as a 4, and a capacity planning would no longer take it into consideration when running that plan. When you talk about the calculations, based on the type of prime load you use, it is saying it's going to either use number of machines or number of employees to calculate your total capacity, okay? And that's going to be based on also how many hours you run per week. So you'll see here, I have a number of employees of 4, and that's 8 hours a day. It's going to give me a total of 32 hours per day for that specific work center, okay? So that's how the calculation is done. It's taking your amount of hours you have running for that shift or for that day, multiplied by whatever your prime load is. And since I'm doing labor, it's going to be based on my number of employees. Okay, if I was doing machine, it'd be based on the number of machines. And when we talk about that hours and efficiencies, that's here where we're defining what are the efficiencies and utilizations associated to this work center. So like I talked about earlier, if you were a utilization of 50%, my 32 hours would give me a rated capacity of 16 hours, okay? So that is how some of those calculations are utilized to get you the data that you need. So work centers are obviously key. Work centers then are going to be driving your resource units. So So in here, you can see it's going to say for all these shifts, my efficiencies, my hours. And this is giving me, so it's looking at my Workday calendar, which you can define specific Workday calendars for specific work centers. So you saw in, or you, if I jump back, this will give you a little bit of a visual. You can define a specific calendar name in here. So say you have one work center that runs 7 days a week, one runs 4 days a week, with, you know, every other month running 5 days, whatever it is. You can select different calendar names, which would drive capacities according to that. So coming back here, like I said, since I have 100% efficiency, 100% utilization, it's giving me 8 times the amount of resources I have and giving me 32 hours per day for this specific work site. Okay? And the process of running this interchange resource unit, you're going to just need to run that program, R3007G, which will generate this for you, okay, based on those characteristics or those values that I talked about earlier on. So resource units, having your work center set up, and obviously your routings, which we won't get into today because those are pretty self-explanatory. That is what is going to help you understand what your capacities look like, which in turn will help you do a better job of scheduling your production, okay? When I think of production scheduling, it is making sure that what you're going to be running through the shop floor can actually get through the shop floor. It's not just a way to sequence lines or sequence orders. It's a way to make sure that you are truly going to be able to build what you think you're going to be able to build. So there's 2 different ways to kind of look at your capacities. And like I talked about earlier, the old way, I'll call it, is this review work center load. So I can come in here, put in that work center. And it'll give me my rated, my load, my resources used, resources available, all that stuff, okay? This view isn't all that great. I'm not a fan of it just because, you know, it's hard to understand what are the work orders running through. This doesn't allow you to make changes to the work order, move the dates. Hey, this one's over capacity. What are my next steps? So,
hey, Brian.
Yeah.
I have a question about what if you have 2 shifts?
If you have 2 shifts, then it would just multiply if it's the same amount of hours. So if I had 8 hours and 8 hours, right? It would just multiply it by 16 versus by 8. So in here, once again, this isn't all that easy to make changes to. Now, if I jump back here, and I'm going to jump into the work center load review. All right. So this is that E313000 application where you can come in and see a very visual view of the work orders, the capacities, and all of that is running through a specific work center, okay? So I have my work center defined, the branch plan associated to it. You can see, like we saw earlier, these are all 32 hours. So it's going to give me, for each of these days, how many hours do I have left from a capacity perspective, okay? So all of these, since there's no work orders in the demo data, there's 32 hours because I haven't used any of my capacity for the day. Whereas any of these spots you may see work orders associated to them, there is a different number based on how much load that work center is being hit for that day, okay? So on the 10th, I pretty much have almost all of my capacity used. On the 11th, I have 17 hours left over, and then anything you
Hey,
see that's
Brian.
red. Yeah.
Real quick, I've got a question about what the program name is, and then also, is this Work Center load review utilizing service type work orders?
So the first one was what's the program name?
Correct.
So yeah, it's E313000, and it's called Work Center Load Review. So, and I can pull it up too, and I'm not sure if this will show. I'll get, because I was sharing the screen. So you can see here, E313000. Don't try and fast path to it. Just FYI for everyone, it won't work. You have to go down the menu path to get there. And that menu path, for those of you who are wondering, it's a long one, but it's right here all the way at the bottom in your daily order of preparation for discrete manufacturing. So like I said, don't try and fast path there because it won't let you do it because it's not a standard IV interactive app. But you can go down the menu path, save it as a favorite, and you'll have access to it. And then Adam, I'm sorry, what was the second question?
It was asking if the Work Center load review was utilizing the service type work orders yet.
No, it still only uses discrete work orders at this point.
And then we've got one more. Does the capacity calendar account for work orders not completed from the previous day?
Yes. So what it would do, let me just go out of this. It'll keep work orders that are open on your calendar, and it'll show obviously a negative capacity for that day because you don't have any more. So it is a really good visual view too. Let's say I had, today is Thursday. If I had a work center on the, or a work order on the 3rd, it would still show there, but it would be in red because it's obviously late at this point. So you'd want to move it to today or whatever it is to make sure that you run that order. Okay. So in here, very graphical view. You can look at it in a few different ways. Right now, I'm looking at a monthly view. If you want to go down to the weekly level, you can do that. And then obviously at the daily level. And this is a view, if you're in here for the day, you want to see all my jobs that I'm running, all that can be seen. When you click on a specific day or a specific work order, on here on the left side, you can get to some information associated to it. So you'll see things like what's the operation sequence, what is the operation description. So you see this is an assembly, start date, request date, how many hours do I have remaining, quantity ordered, how many have been completed. So all that stuff you may want to see, have I ran 100 of the 200 so far, or is this order completely not touched at this point? All that can be seen. And the same thing, you don't have to look over here on the left side. You can also just click on it and it'll pop up and give you that same type of information. Okay, so kids bike, purple 220. This is the description of the work order, and then all this other stuff, like I said, operation sequence, assembly is the description, all the way through some of the key things you may want to see. How many are completed, scrapped, remaining, and it will take hours away too as you do completions. Now from here too, remember those key pieces we talked about earlier? Work center details, resource units, both of those can be gotten to that app pretty quickly. So it's down here at the bottom. You can just click on that and it'll bring you directly to the application. There's also other things you can get to from an app's perspective as well. There are, I'll call them row exits for lack of better terms. I can right click on any of these orders and get to things like work order details, routings, parts lists, parts list inquiry, time entry, and then the reschedule work orders one we're going to talk about in a little bit. This is where you can drag and drop and move work orders around. Pretty slick little feature. So once again, it's just bringing me to my standard app. So I can just click on work order parts list and it brings me into the standard work order parts list application.
Hey, Brian, I have questions.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is the work center load review, what you were saying requires an ADF server.
Mhm.
All right, and then the next one was, does the view require the configuration of the AIS server?
Yes.
And then our third one is, if we have 2 shifts and need to put a resource, how can I do that?
If you have 2 shifts, you need to, so this is looking across a full day. So this isn't looking, think of this more as a summary view, I'll call it. It's not going to show you by shift. It's going to show you for a specific day, what is your load. And then I'll talk, as we get a little bit further in how you could possibly look at doing it more at a detailed level from a shift perspective. Okay, so once again, you can get to all different types of apps. If I want to make a change, I can do work order details, brings me into my standard details. So think of these as row exits inside of this application. Now, in this specific scenario, you'll see my capacities look pretty good, and this is dummy data, right? So in a true manufacturing environment, you see work orders across multiple weeks, but just for today's purposes, just showing you some examples here. So on the 8th, I'm right now short, meaning I have too much load associated to this day. Now, I can really approach this 2 different ways. I could pull this work order back to Friday or Thursday because I know I have the capacity, or I can move it out to another day that I have capacity further on from a date perspective. And to do that, in the past, you'd have to go to the work order header, you change the date, or you'd maybe change the routing step. It was kind of it's a hard process. If you row exit and go to reschedule work order, it brings in this slick little screen, scheduled work order operations, and just to give you the app on this one, P313003X is the application. And this shows me my capacities for not just the work center that I'm looking at, but also the other work centers that are associated to this routing. So the value of that is if I move a work center or a work order to a different date and it puts another work center over capacity, well, that's not helping me, okay, right? So by having this visual view in here, I can see if I make this change, am I good across the board? Not just am I good at this one work center, which is really nice. Some other things too, work order details, routing, parts list inquiry, all that can be seen down here at the bottom. And you can get to them just like you could from a row exit perspective. So once again, I can either pull this work order back. Adam, is that you?
Yeah, sorry, we've got another question. Does the load come from the capacity files or associated with the scheduling dispatch?
Say it again.
It asks, does the load come from the capacity file or is it associated with the scheduling dispatch?
It comes from the capacity file. I'm not sure I understand the second piece of it. It's not based on your dispatch. These are all the steps in your routing, okay? And it's giving you your capacities like it would in that work center calendar based on how many hours you work per day at that specific spot. Okay, so for today, I'm just you can see, until I have true capacity to do this work, I'm gonna say for today, it's on a Thursday. So I'm gonna pull this guy, drag it here. And what this is actually doing in the background is it's calling an orchestration to move the order. So you just saw it moved that order to Thursday just by dragging it, and it also moved the routing steps below it, and those are also good from a capacity perspective as well, okay? You could always click this undo all changes button, and it'll just revert it back to where it was. meaning it would bring it back to Tuesday. But since this is exactly what I wanted to do, I would just click close. And if I refresh my screen, now my capacities are in good shape. So, and I can grab any of these work orders and move them. One of the other things too, just to talk through on the rescheduling piece, there's a default, but also you can look at this in a 2-week. I can look at this in a 1 week. All of that is really just dependent on how you want to view it visually. So most people are doing it week by week, so this is probably more applicable, but you can do different views. And you can do a go-to, you can do a time scale. So that's just changing how the top information drives through.
Brian, I got another question. So let's say I run my capacity plan every week. Will it consider open orders in production? And will it recommend to close, open, or cancel work orders?
So don't think of it as an MRP tool. This here will show all open orders that you have running through the shop. So, and you can pick what statuses as well you want included. So if you're an organization where you don't want things to be on your capacity schedule until they're firm, we'll call it for lack of better terms, you can exclude those from this view. It's not going to tell you to cancel. That's where MRP would still be utilized. This is more just looking at what you have that you know you're going to build, and you want to make sure you have it scheduled accordingly. So Work Center Load Calendar View, really nice application. I'm going to jump in the background of these just to show you the processing options you have access to. And they're pretty simplistic, but you can default a work center, default a branch plant. Like I said before, you can define what operations you want to include. So if you don't want to include closed operations, if you want to use a specific type of supply and demand inclusion rules, meaning you don't want a specific status of work order to be included, you can do that. Quantity calculation, this is saying if you want to include scrap versus canceled quantities. And these versions are those row exits, quote unquote row exits that I talked about earlier, that can get you to those applications. And then the same thing for that P313003X. You can pick and choose the amount of days before and after a work order start date to view. So what's valuable about that is if you're pulling work orders backwards, you can see 7 days in the past. Same type of thing. It's going to show you the number of days after end date. So these are just quick little things that you can configure based on how you do your planning to give you that visibility that you need. Okay, so once you've scheduled everything at a high level, you know you have your capacities in order. I'm going to jump to my shop floor workbench. So this is where normally we see places do things like sequencing. They can assign, what shift is running which orders, stuff like that. And that's all really driven based on category codes and different values in your work order header. And like I talked about earlier, you're going to want to sequence your work orders based on something, whether it's your master planning family code, or by a paint color, or whatever you want it to be. You're going to want to sequence those in a specific way. And inside the work order header, there actually is a sequence code. So you can come in and do your sequencing by clicking on the work order and going directly in here to the sequence. Now, what I normally recommend doing, though, in this example, is just adding it to the right side of your screen via Cafe 1. So instead of you having to click into it, as I click to a different one, it will automatically give me this visibility to change the sequence number. Maybe I want to move this one to the middle in between. I can change it here and I'm good to go. So a lot of people think that Cafe 1 can only be used for viewing data, but you actually can go directly into update forms as well and make changes which can then get reflected on that work order header. And also,
we got another question. If you record production by operation, will that decrement the hours needed on a work order?
I didn't hear the beginning of that, sorry.
If you record production by operation, will it decrement the hours needed on a work order?
Yes. Yeah. I showed you that work order reschedule application connected to the work order calendar, but you can utilize that actually as a Cafe 1 too. So you'll see I have a Cafe 1 where I can bring in that drag and drop capability associated to this app. So you don't need to go, excuse me, to the work order or the work center load calendar to utilize this. You can link it directly to a work order and it will pull that drag and drop screen in here. So I can still drag and drop it like if I was utilizing any other screen inside of Big E. So this is really cool because any app that you go to where it's work order based and you want to be able to easily change a date, think of it even with MRP, I could see this as a value where you have MRP, process messages, and on the right side you have your scheduling that attaches to that work order, and you can move that work order to make sure you have all the passes that you need. So you don't need to just do it through that work center load calendar app. You can actually do it via a Cafe 1 as well. Okay, so Work Center Load Review, really nice application. Like I was saying earlier, it's been around for a couple of years. And the more people, I think, get into it and start understanding what it can do, it's not going to do everything that you need it to do, meaning it's not a full-blown production scheduling tool, but a lot of people don't need that. They just need to know if what they are running through the floor, they have the capacity to do it. And making sure that all the bottleneck, maybe you just have this set up for your bottleneck work centers that you know are your biggest problems. You don't have to do this type of scheduling or this type of view for every single work center that you have. You may just want to do it for those bottlenecks that are always causing issues when you're running products through the floor. I'm going to hop back to my PowerPoint. So I'll stop there. I know there's been questions throughout, but does anyone else have any questions for right now?
As of right now, no. I'll give it a second here and see if we get any. Oh, here's one. There's a few. Does the workload review display information real time as work order transactions are recorded?
Yes, and that's a great point, and I forgot to bring that up in the actual presentation. So one of the other main values of that work center load calendar, and let me just jump back to kind of speak to it. This is real time, meaning if I make a change, if a customer makes a change to a quantity and I change the quantity on the header, this automatically gets updated. Whereas if you use standard capacity planning and you're utilizing an app like this, you have to run capacity planning to see that change. With this application, it is real time. You make a change, if I click refresh, that change is there. So the other place we've seen it, it's not really production scheduling based, but where we've seen some organizations is they put a big monitor on their shop floor at each work center, shows the work orders they have for the day. It allows them to look at the parts list, allows them to add time. You could not give them security to reschedule them if you don't want them touching all that type of information. But this is a great view to going somewhat paperless because it is real time. A lot of places have issues with work order changes, meaning a scheduler sends a packet to the floor and then finds out a day later that the bill of material is wrong. Now they have to go find that packet, redline it, send out a new one. What you could do with the work center load is you just change it in JD Edwards. That change is automatically reflected, and you could kick off a notification or something like that to maybe the line lead to say, hey, work order 1, 2, 3, 4 had a change, to make sure that if it did start or they started pulling parts or something like that, he can run that down.
All right, and then we have one. I tried to run the E31300 Work Center load review, but I got an error saying the system issues prevent the application from opening. I am at application version 9.2 and tools release 9219. What am I missing?
Well, my first question is, did you fast path to it, or did you go through the menu?
That's a good question. He said
that. What?
He said menu.
Okay, then it's something within your technical architecture that isn't set up correctly. Maybe it's the ADF server, maybe it's the AIS server. All your tools releases sound fine. You should be able to have access to it. I'm guessing it's an architecture issue.
All right, and that looks like that's it for now.
Okay, so guys, that's all that I had for today. So hopefully this webinar series has been helpful to you guys. If you do have any other topics, we talked about this throughout the series that you'd like to see or you think it'd be valuable, please feel free to reach out to us. Also, if you have any other questions around some of these topics that we have gone through, ping Adam or I, and we'll make sure to get back to you. So enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and hopefully we'll be talking to you later. Thanks, guys.